the first time all of a sudden radio could see this opportunity of doubling their revenue. And we were testing it all on their unsold inventory.
The remnants, right?
Powerful. What's that?
On the remnants, right? Yeah, I mean, like.
All the remnant. I mean, at that time, people were selling it as remnant for pennies on the dollar. We wouldn't even sell it as remnant because our algorithms could predict the reliability of how much of this we could get. And by pooling it together in a market, we didn't call it remnant. We knew historically what we could rely on, and we sold it as guaranteed revenue. And we were making more on it than what they were selling it in locally. Well, that scared the hell out of radio. I mean, that's where, Perry mentioned we were sitting down with Eric Schmidt. And this was after I had arranged a 2020 interview at the national conference for radio and television. And, at the very end of it, we go back with Larry and Sergey and the radio industry and Eric Schmidt, and they all band together and basically say, you're too powerful. And agencies that would normally buy from us direct now are preferring to buy through you. And so we want to limit your inventory. And in that meeting, going back and forth, Eric Schmidt, after 3 years of doing what we were doing, pulled the plug on the whole thing and shut it all down. Basically said, radio, you got your head's buried in the sand and you're a dinosaur and you're going to go by the way of the dodo bird. And that was it.
Wow.
I shortchanged a very long story there, but I'm trying to be
no, it's good.
Sensitive to the timing.
No, just to be clear, you got your money, and now at this point you're working for the company. What? Just explain, so the ideal failed, but you sold the company, right?
Right. So look, at that point, I had what they call golden handcuffs. So in order to get my money, I had to be there. Me and the primary people had to be there for 3 years, and we got paid in tranches over a 3-year period. That 3-year period was up at that time. And there were 300 of us that were part of the company when they acquired us. They basically told everybody that you have 6 months, we're going to pay you for 6 months, and you can either come to work every day and try to find a new job, or you can not show up, but we're going to pay you for 6 months. And if you found a new assignment at the end of that time, then we'd love to keep you. And of course, me and the whole, all the entrepreneurs left the minute they said, you had me at hello. So
yeah, 6 month vacation.
We walked out the door.
Right.
Yeah. Now, but, and Perry, I've shared with you, this is a time, this was actually a very hard time for me. This is one of the largest successes that I've achieved. And this is at a time where I'm thinking I should be the happiest that I should be in my life. And this is at a time where I fall into a deep depression. I start questioning the existence of God. I start to wonder what the hell this game of life is all about. And, I mean, I found more happiness in my struggles and trials and tribulations that I did in my success, where all of a sudden I come home and I look at my wife and I realize we don't know who each other is. And I missed a decade of my kids growing up, and just things didn't kind of fall together the way I thought they would. Right. And, that's, big thing that I learned through that is I was delaying my joy, saying that my joy and happiness was dependent on reaching a certain level of success. And until I get there, I don't have permission to experience life and joy, that I have to do this one thing. And then you get there and you find out that you just left carnage everywhere. And, the things that you treasure the most, now you have to go back and rebuild. So just don't, I focus right now on, I only spend time doing things that I can do with balance. And I try to find joy and gratefulness in everything that I do, because it is not the destination. The problem with us entrepreneurs is we never get to the destination. It's like the horizon. It just keeps moving. The closer we get to it, the farther away it gets, right? We keep changing the rules. And so you have to find a way to be passionate about anything that you go ahead.
The biggest perspective giver for me was getting a motorcycle, because when you're on a motorcycle, you don't care about the destination. You only care about the journey. And you want the journey to be windier and bumpier and more challenging to make the ride last longer. That was a good perspective giver for me.
So that's my little two-door sports car or two-seater sports car now because my wife doesn't want me to be on a motorcycle anymore. In Southern California here, it's almost a suicide mission. People ignore you.
Yeah, right.
But I'm with you, brother. I grew up on a motorcycle, and that was the closest thing to heaven until I got my pilot's license. I love, like, there's no better therapy in the world than flying through the clouds for 1,500 feet and coming out above. It's just like it's a thin place.
Yep.
You feel like you're just inches away from God's presence.
Yeah.
So I think this is all very interesting, and it's also very complicated, right? And okay, so you're like a quintessential serial entrepreneur, right? In fact, you could look it up in the dictionary and maybe your picture would be there, right? All these, all these different things. And there's a bunch of really interesting parts to it. So you were a key player in selling a business to Google for over $1 billion, right? And you're rubbing shoulders with some of the most powerful people in the world, in the internet and in radio. Really what you've done is you've bridged two industries together, which notice that is very, very, very frequently a success formula, is you bring two worlds together and you make connectors between the two and you make things flow, and
like
then all
Apple.
of a sudden, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And you made a lot of money, which of course that give you a war chest for later being able to do a bunch of interesting things. But you also had an existential crisis because I could totally relate. When you talk about postponing joy, what I relate to is basically my Amway pink Kool-Aid days. I completely postponed the rest of my life. I'm going to do this, right? And I couldn't get it to work, but I have completely denied myself permission to basically have any form of fun doing anything, and I'm just going to grind away at this thing. I think I actually figured out how to have a much more balanced life when I started doing what I'm doing now. But most, I don't know about all, but certainly most of the people that I've talked to who had a big liquidation event found it to be a shocking experience. Could you talk just a little bit more about that? Because we like to tell the whole story.
Yeah, well, so a quick side note, I was also in Amway and two other multi-level marketing businesses, so we have that in common. I don't know what it is about Planet Perry. So the liquidation event, and how do you mean? From what standpoint?
Well, you got a big pile of money when the thing got sold to Google. And you thought that was going to make you happy, but so explain more about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can talk about the money side of it, and then we can talk about all the carnage the sacrifices that I made to get to that point. And now all of a sudden the need for cleanup and reentry.
Sure.
On the money side, look, it's interesting, but we all have different goals, and so first of all, I come from small pickings, and I just say that to say that, look, I feel very blessed. It's funny when you're in the middle of what you're in the middle. I mean, you watch TV or look at people in different areas of the world, and you look at them with this empathy and sympathy, whatever. You look at them and say, gosh, I got it so good, you got it so horrible, But I remember going to the Philippines and seeing these little kids running around the dump site, throwing freaking rocks at cans and laughing like my kids at home playing PlayStation in front of the air conditioning at home, the same kind of joy. And so, that was the first connections to happiness being here, and that you can control it all here. And growing up south of the tracks, and I mean literally, I grew up in a small town in Nebraska. The railroad tracks was 100 yards in front. The cell barn is like 50 yards to my right side. And for those of you who don't know what a cell barn is, that's where in rural areas, that's where all the farmers, and in our case, within the 30 to 60 mile range, they would bring all their pigs and sheep and horses and cows. They bring them either for sale for breeding or for slaughter, and the slaughterhouse is right next door to that. So we smelled, I mean, you had the smell of manure in the air at all times. And, you know, the school, the whole neighborhood, if you live around that or if you grow up on a farm, you take on that aroma. And so when you go into town, you don't even smell it on yourself. It's just there. But I remember our school, our area of town stopped growing, and so they couldn't support the school anymore. So in the 5th grade, when I was 10, we had to go to a school 6 blocks away or a mile away and get bused there. And when we walked in, I remember all the kids looking at us and pinching their nose, and we're like, what? I mean, we didn't smell ourselves or each other, but these kids are all, pew, you stink. And I remember when it finally came clear, you know, they're all telling us what's going on. I remember weeping at home about how we were being picked on and separated because, you know, we live here. How come we can't live somewhere else? And my grandpa laughing his ass off at me. And he looks at me and he says, son, that there's the smell of money. and, you know, it took a little while for that one to sink in. But when I look at that, I think about the parable for life that was in there, you know, that, you know, the people that think that things are going to come easy and there's not going to be a smell with it, or there's not going to be sweat and there's not going to be work that's behind all that, and to appreciate everything. So I grew up with absolutely nothing and all that I wanted. It wasn't that I needed this huge house or that I needed, you know, this huge troughs of money, or I needed to own airplanes and all this different stuff. The things that I were working for is I just wanted my wife to have the option of not working 2 jobs around the clock. I mean, when we were the kid, I came home, we fed ourselves raw men and macaroni and cheese and hot dogs, you know, and we mixed them all together. Our kids look at that and go, what? You're going to put hot dogs and macaroni and cheese? And, you know, I just wanted the ability for my wife to have the option of spending time and influencing and raising the children. I wanted the ability to be able to help them get into school, not to pay for their full college, but to help get them in and to help maybe prime that pump and to be able to take a vacation together with the family. I mean, vacations with my family were going to the Elkhorn River and pitching a tent. And, you know, there were no running water there. If you wanted to wash your hair, you did it in the river. And if you had to go to the bathroom, you dug a hole. You know, I remember the first time I camped in Wisconsin where they actually had, you know, bathrooms. I'm like, this isn't camping. This is like hotel. But coming from that place, so when the money was there, it actually wasn't this big thing that I like, you know, now I can go buy this and I can go buy that and I go buy this. It was just, I wanted it to just give me peace that said, I don't have to worry about all these things that my parents struggled with, you know, that their biggest fights were always about money and time with the kids and not being able to do this for the kids and do that for the kids and all the struggles that went on there. But the challenge is when we got to that place, now I'm trying to interface with my wife, and because I was gone for a decade, flew 2.5, you know, I have over 2 million miles with American Airlines, and I'm not proud of that. I mean, when I look at that, it's several years of 40-hour weeks on an airplane, you know, and that's missing the first steps, the first time they ride the bicycle, the first words that come out of their mouth. And what happened is my wife got to this place where she stopped complaining about it, and she just built a life around her. And when I wanted to now be a part of that life, there was no dependency on it. It was hard. Like, what does that even look like? You know, I don't need, you know, I got this handled, honey, you know. Matter of fact, I'm thinking now I can work from home and I can spend more time at home. And instead of 10 years of when are you going to stop traveling, it was like, when are you going on your next trip? You know? And so it just kind of turned things upside down. And I did. My faith at that time, you know, was kind of inherited. You know, it's just like I didn't know the origination of why I was so driven to want to run a business, or I didn't understand why the grass was green. I was just told it was green. The sky is blue, and, you know, and so my faith was the same thing. I was just kind of raised in it, and it had been challenged a lot throughout, especially all my investors were Chinese. And so they're questioning why Christianity is the way. And I don't want to turn this into a big sermon here, but I just finally got to this place where I'm like, you know what? I don't know. I don't have any idea. Does God really exist? And so I got into a very dark place. And actually, I was questioning the meaning of everything. I mean, is this just a big sick joke? Are we just thrown in this maze and we run around and chase our tail and we get to the end and get to the cheese and find out, like I was already eating before I got here, and so now what?
Well,
but going through a series of apologetics, going to marriage counseling, actually recommitting to my faith, learning how to love my wife like Christ loved the church, which was that was a hard concept. That one took a lot of introspective to understand what that really meant. And when I finally got to that place, things started coming together. And the beautiful thing is I have never adjusted. I live in the same, when I moved to California in 1994, I had $3,000 in the bank. 3 years later, I bought a house. It's the same house I live in today. I mean, we've had opportunities to buy the beach house and the vacation house, and I throw it out there, and the wife's like, "No, I'm happy right here. Let's rent when we want something." She's like, "I don't want a house on the beach. People will be trailing sand in all the damn time, and all the maintenance that goes along with it. I'd rather rent a different house every time we want to go on vacation." So praise God, I married a Midwestern woman who didn't grow up with entitlement and never was dependent on reaching certain levels of anything on her success or for her happiness.
I mean, she be on the next Real Housewives of San Clemente.
No, she won't even watch the show. But I remember coming home and she's always like, honey, I want more time with you. I don't care. All these things that you're shooting for, they're not important to me. I would live in a grass hut, with a gunny sack on, and I would look at her and laugh and say, "You're kidding yourself. You don't know what you're talking about. You'll see. You really want these things too." She really never cared. I mean, she's the. I think she was an angel, is what she was, and is, and she. And so here's the other thing. So look, part of reaching some of the success I did, you do a little self-promotion. You meet people, and it's like, "Hey, I'm Chad Meisinger. I sold the company to Google for $8 billion, for $1 billion." I mean, it's like these things come out in the first several minutes of your conversation because you think you need to establish the pecking order of the room and who's done what, Yeah. And those things made my wife want to vomit. And actually, they created distance between us because she married this very humble Midwestern boy, and after a while, she's like, "Did I ever know you?" Like when you put that mask on, and of course, she didn't. Like, I have learned that we have these masks and we put them on for the one we wear at church, the one we wear in the neighborhood, the one we wear with the other kids as parents, the one we wear at work, the one we wear with investors, the one we wear with shareholders, all these different masks. And it's finally getting to this place where you're the same person in all areas of your life, to actually get to this place where you are just so at peace with who you are, all of your brokenness, that's who you are. And that was the biggest, when my wife didn't trust me anymore, it's because the person that I was saying that I was didn't align with the person that she knew when she got married. When she's sitting in conversations and I'm self-promoting myself, or instead of enjoying a nice glass of wine with the neighbors, having to say, "That's a $300 bottle of wine," she hated that. She would want to leave the room. Like, why did you have to say that? Why do they need to know how much that wine costs?
Ego posturing, right?
Yeah. So
no, and I think you're right. I think that those masks are a great way to put it. And I mean, Perry and I have had these conversations over the last couple of years of being more of our authentic self and stop filtering ourselves, because I would say those masks are filters, right? To obscure something that we don't want people to see. And it's not that we need to walk around buck naked and show everything to everybody, but we don't have to be that transparent. Sometimes the world can't handle all of us, but it's reducing the filters. Yeah, I think that's those masks are great. How you have your cute little avatar designed right behind your head there. So
yeah, you can even talk about that, because that's fitting, right? So, but I just want to, I want people to hear the whole story. And this whole crisis that Chad had of, well, good grief, like, who am I? This is very, very common when people have a big financial spike. Okay, when they hit the hockey stick, It's very common. And it's not that, like, I'm not in any way against having that spike, but I don't think too many people ever tell you that that's coming. I mean, did anybody tell you that that was coming? It's almost.
I mean, the closest. I would say the closest I came. There's a book out there called Halftime, but you know what? Regardless, until you're in it in that suit, you just. First of all, you're in denial. You're like, no, everything's gonna be great. What are you talking about? When I get there, I'm not gonna have a care. I'm not gonna have a worry in the world.
Especially because so many business owners are so tired of robbing Peter to pay Paul to keep the bills paid,
right.
and I don't have that pressure anymore. And I think this is where, just as society as a whole, playing armchair quarterback on the wealthy, you're putting in all this effort to try to get money, but then they don't realize all the effort to keep that money, and that becomes a full-time job in and of itself, or else you end up like all the lottery winners, right? So in addition
Absolutely.
to the internal
for a long
roller
time,
coaster,
there was actually more stress on how the hell I was going to keep it than it was to actually make it. Because when you're making it, you're just running and chugging, and you're just creating it and
I
running
know
towards
a lot
the goal.
of entrepreneurs that are really high earners. They are great at making it and great at spending all of it. They have no idea how to keep it, and so it becomes a shift, right, of skill set. But in addition to the huge internal roller coaster of emotion and awareness. So
agreed.
So I want to put that out there, and I want people to hear the whole story.